clinic where she works.
The number to respiratory therapy and the number for the charge nurse on the unit next door. You just have those phone numbers memorized because that's a big part of your job.
But she's often curious about what she could be making. She found one of her old shifts posted on a site that recruits traveling nurses.
No overtime, 36 hours a week, my exact same shift for $4,800.
When she was doing it, it was more like $1,200 a week.
When you're working next to somebody that's making quite that much more than you and you're doing the exact same job, it feels a little bit dystopic.
Her problem isn't with the other nurses making the high rates, but with hospitals, she says, don't staff properly in the first place. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
And there's word banking giant Citigroup will start firing employees who don't get vaccinated or get an approved exemption. The firing notices could go out January 31st. I'm David Brancaccio, Marketplace Morning Report from APM, American Public Media.
Special Olympics Florida provides sports training, competition, and health services for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. From January 5th through the 16th, Floridians who visit Publix can help foster the dreams of these athletes. More at SpecialOlympicsFlorida.org.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, answering who, what, when, where, why, and how is critical to proving the truth. More at TerrellHogan.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Ahead in the next 5 minutes, live local news for the First Coast from the WJCT News team.
Florida lawmakers demand an audit of FP&L's books. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, we'll tell you why representatives from Jacksonville and Orlando want an investigation into Florida Power and Light, the utility giant that tried and failed to buy JEA. All of that ahead. Then later.
So if you look over the whole month of December, Jacksonville was running on average 6.7 degrees Fahrenheit above your normal temperatures. And so normal is defined relative to 1991 through 2020.
New data from our partner Climate Central on why winter is the fastest warming season in Florida. Plus a look back at the Clown Out game at the bank on Sunday. That and more, all ahead. After the day's news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Corva Coleman. U.S. diplomats are meeting their Russian counterparts today in Geneva. They're talking about issues over Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has positioned about 100,000 Russian troops on his country's border with Ukraine. Today's talks are intended to see if there is a way to prevent any possible Russian incursion. Today's meeting comes as Putin has made statements about sending Russian troops into neighboring Kazakhstan. The Kazakh president invited Russia and some other former Soviet republics to send their troops to put down protests in Kazakhstan. NPR's Charles Maines says Putin applauded the joint troops that were sent in as supposed peacekeepers.
Putin argued that by acting together, Russia and its allies had shown they won't allow these foreign-backed street revolutions to succeed. And so it seems Putin and others, like Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko, who is also on the call, are arguing Kazakhstan is now a precedent, a case study for these peacekeepers to be deployed whenever there's popular discontent, because in their view, there's always a hidden foreign hand stoking it.
NPR's Charles Maines reporting. The surge in Omicron cases continues in the U.S. with more than 700,000 new infections per day. NPR's Allison Aubrey reports the number of people being hospitalized with COVID-19 continues to rise.
According to CDC, about 18,000 people are being admitted a day. That's a 50% increase in hospitalizations compared to a week earlier. The people most at risk are those who are not vaccinated. This includes adults and children. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky says some kids come to the ER for something other than COVID, but end up testing positive for the virus.
We are seeing a rise in hospitalizations, both because they are coming in with COVID, but also because they're screening in for COVID.
Walensky says there's no signs that signal Omicron is more severe in children. Allison Aubrey, NPR News.
U.S. greenhouse gas emissions increased by more than 6% last year, according to new data this morning. NPR's Jeff Brady reports a recovering economy is a big reason.
In 2020, people stayed home and didn't use as much fossil fuels, but that changed last year with vaccines. Kate Larson with the research firm Rhodium Group says this trend shows the U.S. is not on track to meet commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement.
We need to see annual emission reductions of around 5% each year. And this year we saw emissions grow over 6%.
Transportation is the largest source of climate warming emissions, especially for moving freight. The electricity sector also increased emissions last year as coal-fired power plants met some of the increased demand. Meanwhile, a key piece of President Biden's plan to cut emissions in half by the end of this decade is stalled in Congress. Jeff Brady, NPR News.
This is NPR.
And this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Michelle Corum. There are two things the Florida legislature must tackle during its annual 60-day session: pass a massive state budget and redraw political maps. There have already been more than 3,000 bills filed for the session that starts Tuesday, the vast majority of which won't become law. The session, though, will be largely driven by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' agenda as he seeks re-election in November. A former U.S. Postal Service contractor has been charged with mail theft. As Matthew Petty reports, the woman was arrested after thousands of pieces of stolen mail were found in her bedroom and her car.
According to court documents, 25-year-old Miranda Farley had been a USPS contract mail carrier for about 6 years, delivering mail around the villages. In November last year, Farley's supervisor reported several tubs and bags of mail that had been unlawfully opened. Farley's mother, who's also a USPS contractor, brought the mail to the Lady Lake postmaster after finding it in Farley's bedroom and car. About 4,000 pieces of mail had been unlawfully opened. Farley told a postal inspector she'd been opening outgoing mail containing greeting cards in Lake and Sumter counties for about a month in order to steal money and gift cards. She said her heroin addiction had caused her to steal. If convicted, Farley faces up to 5 years in federal prison. I'm Matthew Petty in Orlando.
It's 62 degrees in Jacksonville right now. Cloudy and breezy for today, with temperatures falling to the mid-50s by this afternoon, down to the 40s tonight, and near 60 tomorrow.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include iDrive with Remote PC, providing remote access to PCs, Macs, and servers from anywhere, assisting those working from home, and also enabling remote assistance for customers at remotepc.com.
Local lawmakers demand an investigation of Florida's biggest utility. Good morning. We're live from Studio 5, and I'm Melissa Ross. Thanks for listening to First Coast Connect this morning. Just ahead this Monday, why our local representatives want a peek inside FP&L's books. Remember, FP&L almost pulled off buying JEA out from under the citizens of Jacksonville. Give us a call now. It's 549-2937. Then later, the Great Clown Out. We'll have a recap of the circus atmosphere at the Jaguars' final game of the season Sunday. They actually beat the Colts. That and more coming up. But first this morning, a group of lawmakers from Jacksonville and Orlando is asking the Florida Public Service Commission to conduct an audit of Florida Power and Light, the state's utility giant. They want to look at the utility's books to make sure ratepayer money wasn't used to finance controversial dark money political operations that have made headlines across the state. Now, citing reporting that appeared in the Times-Union and the Orlando Sentinel, State House members, including Representative Angie Nixon of Jacksonville, sent a letter to the Public Service Commission saying it's imperative the group make sure ratepayer money wasn't used to, in their words, undermine democracy. All of this includes an episode from a few years back where a member of the Jacksonville City Council was offered a made-up job in a possible effort to get him off the council and tilt support in favor of privatizing JEA, Jacksonville's public utility. Keep in mind, at the same time, a federal grand jury continues to meet in this city, looking into that failed attempt to sell JEA off to the parent company of Florida Power and Light. What does this mean for our politics and our energy demands in Florida? There is so much to this story, so we're pleased to welcome one of the lead reporters, Nate Monroe of the Florida Times-Union, on the line with more about this. Hey, Nate, good morning.
Hey, Melissa.
Good to talk to you. Okay, folks, what are your questions about calls for an audit of Florida Power and Light and how that affects us here in Jacksonville? 549-2937. Give us a call as we talk about the allegations of corruption at the state's biggest utility. 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. So Angie Nixon and other lawmakers from Jacksonville and Orlando are demanding an investigation into Florida Power and Light. And this comes on the heels of revelations published both in your paper and the Orlando Sentinel. Can you recap for our listeners what was uncovered and why there are these calls now for an audit?
Sure. So last year in November, the Orlando Sentinel received this batch of documents anonymously. And what the documents are, and this, sort of came after a lot of work, sort of verifying and corroborating a lot of information in them. These documents are internal records from a former Florida Power and Light consulting firm. And among the several things that these documents indicate is that these Florida Power and Light consultants had, over a series of years, set up a number of political committees and 501c4 nonprofit organizations. And some of these groups had kind of charitable sounding names like Mothers for Moderation, but in reality, all of it existed to funnel political contributions to certain candidates in Florida. And these records indicate that Florida Power and Light knew about this, that Florida Power and Light funded some of these groups, and that really the intent of the groups wasn't just to funnel money, but to funnel FPL money to statewide candidates. So
money that they were getting from the ratepayers, from us, not you and me particular, but average folks.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe just hedge a tiny bit there to say that, Florida Power and Light does have sort of like affiliate businesses, and they do generate some revenue that doesn't come directly from ratepayers. But, I mean, most of their revenue does, and it seems logical to assume that, some ratepayer money was probably used in this.
Okay, so is the narrative that's emerging, is it that Florida Power and Light was allegedly funding ghost candidates to manipulate state elections to keep Tallahassee in Republican control? It's believed to preserve its interests as an investor-owned utility, and in particular, slow down the transition to renewable energy, solar power. Is that what observers of this utility believe was behind their efforts here?
Generally speaking, yes. There is a bit of a bipartisan tilt. So there is a sort of well-known Democratic consultant who has also been sort of caught up in, I would say, this dark money scandal. But broadly speaking, yes. I mean, the allegation is that FPL helped tilt a few state Senate races toward Republicans, because it's sort of understood that Republicans in Florida are going to be a bit more favorable to private utilities than a Democratic-controlled state Senate would be.
So you have Democrats in the State House, both in Jacksonville and Orlando, demanding an audit from the state's Public Service Commission. But as you report, that PSC is regarded by watchdog groups like Integrity Florida as what's called a captured agency. This commission, which is ostensibly set up to provide oversight to private utilities, is seen as captured, in effect, as not performing its intended role of oversight. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure. Florida Power and Light specifically and private utilities broadly are the biggest political donors in Florida. The Public Service Commission is filled with commissioners appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Florida Senate. And so the basic allegation is that process has been warped by political contributions and influence, and that the Public Service Commission really doesn't regulate the industry so much as serve the industry.
We should note that in your story, you point out no executives from Florida Power and Light or the consultants identified in these secret records have been accused of any wrongdoing. You're listening to First Coast Connect. We're speaking with Nate Monroe about calls for an audit of Florida Power and Light, the utility giant whose parent company tried and failed to buy our own JEA. What are your calls? 549-2937. We'll go to your calls in a moment. So let's bring it back to the 904, Nate. Florida Power and Light, as we've all learned through your reporting and others, tried and failed to buy JEA. How would that have impacted us here if that had actually happened?
That's a big question, and some of that I would have to say at the outset that some of what would happen is not, as a hypothetical, of course, but right now JEA is sort of in local control, so we get to set rates, electric and water rates locally. We don't have to go to the Public Service Commission and get a hearing to set rates. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. It can mean that JEA could raise rates substantially, and there's really no check on their decision beyond, the JEA board, which is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. But it also, as we just talked about, a lot of people believe the PSC is not really a legitimate regulatory body anyway. And so by keeping control of JEA locally, we can actually impose, through the political process, we can impose mandates that JEA invest more in renewable energy. We could impose that they keep rates low. There's a lot we can do locally that were FPL the owner, we would have the local political process would have a lot less influence.
At the same time, a federal grand jury continues to meet here in Jacksonville looking into the attempt to privatize JEA. They could soon issue indictments or not. These proceedings are secret, but have you heard anything new about what's going on with that process?
I haven't. I don't think that there's anything new at this point. I'm reasonably certain that the feds aren't done. So it's not that nothing will happen. I just think nothing has happened yet. These federal investigations can take a very long time. The Middle District of Florida, which is where we are, does not yet have a permanent U.S. attorney. The Biden administration has not named a nominee. And so you sort of, that district has just sort of, among other things like COVID, also been sort of stuck in this transitionary process. And so I do kind of think that that's had an effect on the speed or lack thereof of this federal investigation.
So what are your questions for Nate Monroe of the Times-Union? Calls from state lawmakers to audit Florida Power and Light. The utility giant is accused of political corruption in a wide-ranging probe that stretches all around the state. This was the utility that tried and failed to buy our own JEA. 549-2937. Susan in Jacksonville. Hi, Susan. Good morning.
Yes, I was wondering, there was that famous photo that had, I think Sam Musa was a Florida Power and Light lobbyist? You could maybe confirm that for me. And it was him and Lenny Curry and the CEO of JEA. And Scott Wilson was also in it. But apparently from one article I read in the Times-Union, he didn't really realize what they had. It seemed like they almost trapped him into going. But then when he was running for another office, there was these mailers that went out that made it look like he was part of this conspiracy kind of thing where of selling JEA to FP&L. And did you ever find out who funded those mailers? And is this part of the audit of FP&L? Thank you.
All great questions from Susan. And good memory, by the way. I think she's referring to this infamous photo, Nate, of the mayor and some of his guys at an Atlanta Braves game, if memory serves. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. So this is going to test my memory too. This was a few years ago. I mean, at some point after the sale process had been canceled, I think, we found out that this group of officials had gone to a Braves game, and the attendees included the mayor, the city council president at the time, the then CEO of JEA, Aaron Zahn, and two consultants, Tim Baker and Sam Musa. They are business partners. Tim Baker was a former Florida Power and Light consultant. Sam Musa was at that time a consultant working with NextEra, just Florida Power and Light's parent company, and is actually the company that submitted the bid. Just a small sort of point there. And it raised questions about the bidding process is supposed to be very secretive. It's supposed to be there was a concept called the cone of silence, which meant that, broadly speaking, public officials in Jacksonville were not supposed to be speaking with or having any communications with any of the bidders, any of their agents. And so it seemed at the time like this Braves game at minimum violated at least the spirit of that cone of silence. And yes, much later on, when that city council president, Scott Wilson, had been running to be the clerk of court, that episode was used against him and some mailers. I don't believe we ever found that Florida Power and Light was behind those mailers. I would be sort of surprised if Florida Power and Light was behind those mailers. I think it was as simple as something his opponent picked up on. That was one of many controversies that sprang out of the JEA privatization attempt.
The Jacksonville Ethics Commission looked into this whole flap and issued findings about it on public officials on the public dime going to this game with these lobbyists. Just need to note that 5492937. Emily in St. Augustine. Hi, Emily.
Hi. Yeah. When I heard that there was already like a grand jury involved in this case, that was a bit shocking, because I've never heard of this. I don't think anybody's really heard of this up until now, with SPL trying to buy JEA under everybody's feet.
Yeah, the grand jury's been meeting for some time, Emily, actually. That's right.
Yeah, you'd think that'd be big news.
Well, you know what it is? We've been covering it for some time. The Times-Union, of course, where Nate works, has been covering it. And so I'm glad you called in because we want to keep this in front of people who aren't really following it closely. Emily, where you live, there may be more Florida Power and Light customers. Who do you have for your utility?
I do not know because I am living with my family to go to college. I believe it's Florida Power and Light.
Okay. Okay. Well,
because I'm living near the beach in St. Augustine. So.
Well, thanks for the call. So, Nate, this gives you an idea of how, for people that listen to this show every day, people that read your work every week, they know all about this. But the average Florida resident out there is just kind of only vaguely aware of this. They're only vaguely aware that the company that gives them their electricity is accused of this wide-ranging corruption, essentially. And, I think it's indicative of the overall climate in Florida when it comes to the wild, wild west politics that we have here. This is part of a larger issue in the state of Florida.
It is. Utilities, I mean, they're the things that just kind of exist in the background. We don't typically think a lot about them. As long as the lights are on, other than paying your bill, you don't typically pay much mind to your utility. And it certainly does seem like a bit of an odd thought to realize that the company that provides your power is also a company that's behind, a lot of sort of influence schemes in Florida. But these are companies that have a monopoly on providing us an essential service, something that you have to live a modern life. And so, they're enormously powerful. They're enormously profitable. It's just big business in a state that, with a political culture that really kowtows to big business. It's the biggest business. It's a big deal.
And it gives you a sense as to why here in the Sunshine State, where we have a lot of sunshine, you don't see more solar panels on roofs, because the political and the regulatory environment is set up so that it is more difficult, not easier, but harder for people to access that.
Yes. I mean, I think that, the utility industry, including JEA, has various explanations about why we don't see more renewables, and there may be some level of merit to some of those different explanations. But, I mean, the bottom line is I don't think there's any question that utilities in Florida could be investing more in renewables and wind and solar than they do. There is no question that they could, and they aren't, and the state is not forcing them to, so they don't. They get to adopt that stuff at their own speed, which I think is slower than some residents would want to see.
Here's a tweet from a listener. Listening to you guys right now, it seems the hubris of pushing the JEA fiasco will uncover far more corruption than we ever imagined. It's a bigger story than I knew. Thank you for staying on it. Here's a tweet from Paula. Question for Nate Monroe. Does Florida Power and Light also have a state political committee that is supported by donations from their own executives? And if so, is there a relationship between that entity and these other shadowy 501c4s? That's a good question.
I mean, Florida Power and Light is affiliated with a number of political committees, and some of that's not a secret. I mean, Florida Power and Light readily acknowledges that it gives to Florida campaigns, and I mean, that's something that's been known for a long time. They're allowed to do it, and there's nothing inherently wrong with Florida Power and Light supporting some candidates. As for the sort of scheme that the Sentinel has deeply reported for several months, and that we've sort of helped them with for the JEA related stuff, no, you're not going to find many public records that connect these 501c4s to Florida Power and Light without having gotten some of these secret internal records that were sent to the Orlando Sentinel. And honestly, that's kind of a major point of the story. It's really impossible to untangle a lot of this dark money stuff unless you do have paperwork that kind of explicitly lays it out for you. I mean, that's one of the reasons that these consultants were interested in using 501c4 nonprofits to give money, was specifically because that process leaves a very, very limited public footprint. They specifically chose something that would, that had as minimal public reporting about contributions and who funded them as possible.
On Facebook, a listener writes, let's not forget that Florida Power and Light had local partners in both our city government and JEA itself in their conspiracy to buy JEA. The question becomes, honestly, Nate, for those of us here in town that have been following this, is will any of those players involved in the effort to sell JEA to Florida Power and Light's parent company, will any of them be indicted? Whether it's the former CEO of JEA, Aaron Zahn, another former executive there, whether it's anyone at City Hall, anyone connected to the Curry administration. I think that's the question we all still have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is we don't know. The case that I think, at least until recently, that federal prosecutors have been zeroing in on is a pretty narrow case that would really only involve some former JEA executives. It is not about this big sprawling dark money Florida Power and Light stuff. However, they could certainly look into it. That it's not like they're limited by a single case. I mean, it's something they could be working on, and we may not ever know about that. This federal grand juries operate in a lot of secrecy, so they could be doing more work than we have been able to report thus far.
We'll continue to follow it. In the meantime, thanks as always for stopping by. And I hear congratulations are in order at your household as well. You're going to be a daddy. So welcome to the club of parents who don't sleep very much.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Much more still ahead later in the hour. Did you catch the clown out Sunday? WJCT sports analyst Josh Torres recaps the dismal Jaguars season with the final home game that sent in the clowns. Literally. That's later, but up next.
So if you look over the whole month of December, Jacksonville was running on average 6.7 degrees Fahrenheit above your normal temperatures. And so normal is defined relative to 1991 through 2020.
We'll speak with our partners over at Climate Central, why winter is the fastest warming season in Florida. That's next. We'll be right back. Well, over December, Jacksonville, you might have noticed, was a lot warmer and drier than usual. The average December temperature of 63 degrees was more than 6 degrees above normal. And the rain we got, about 1.5 inches of precipitation, that was about 58% of the normal amount we typically get this time of year. In fact, new data shows that winter is the fastest warming season in Florida, and that trend is only expected to get hotter. For more, I spoke with Andrew Pershing, Director of Climate Science at our partners, Climate Central. Andrew, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to be here.
This new data from Climate Central is of interest to everyone in Florida. Winter is the fastest warming season here now, according to your numbers. It's no surprise to any of us. We've been experiencing it for years. Tell us what you found this December. Let's begin in Jacksonville, where we had a much warmer than normal holiday season. What do the numbers show?
So if you look over the whole month of December, Jacksonville was running on average 6.7 degrees Fahrenheit above your normal temperatures. And so normal is defined relative to 1991 through 2020. And so that makes it the fourth warmest December on record since 1871.
Yeah, that is really eye-popping. December, you find, too, is the month with the second fastest rate of warming overall in this city. Let's widen it out to talk about Florida and just changing seasonal normals here in the Sunshine State. You define a climate normal
as a 30-year average of weather data that provides a baseline so that we can sort of track changes over time. Can you explain how these normals are changing for Florida?
Sure. So climate normals are something that that NOAA and the National Weather Service produce, and they update them every 10 years so that you take basically the last 30 years and you use that to characterize exactly what it says, what you think the normal climate of a region is. And so how warm do you expect it to be? How frequently do you expect to have really hot temperatures or really cold temperatures? And how much precipitation do you expect? And so they're a really great reference for tracking whether a particular year or month or season is unusual. And so relative to that normal, we can see that Jacksonville had a very unusually warm December and an unusually dry December as well. You only had about 60% of the normal amount of precipitation.
Okay, so this gives us a pinpoint, a moment in time. Can you talk about what this means for the next decade, for the next 2 decades and beyond, particularly for people who haven't followed this closely? They're becoming aware that climate change is real and that it is a threat to our future, particularly in a coastal state like Florida. Cast us out into the future a little bit and what we can expect as we keep living under hotter conditions.
Definitely. So we have a lot of extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, much more than humans really have ever experienced, and we're putting more and more into the atmosphere every year. And so that means that the warming that we've experienced around the planet, the warming that we've experienced in the country, and the warming that you've experienced in Florida is going to continue at least for the next 20 or 30 years, based on how we have our global economy set up. And the question really is what happens after 2050. And so if we make changes, reduce our carbon emissions, get to the point where we're no longer putting extra CO2 into the atmosphere, then we will have a chance for the climate to stabilize and for us to get used to the change, or get used to essentially a new normal. But as long as we're still putting a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere, what that means is that we're going to continue to experience these conditions that are unusual and unprecedented and things that we haven't experienced before. And that's really the concern here is the pace of change is starting to speed up in the United States, and it's going to keep going.
Yeah. And as you say, so much of this is baked in for the next few decades. What about something else that made news just last week? What's known as the Doomsday Glacier in Antarctica, a massive ice sheet that if it melts at a faster rate than scientists had originally thought, that we could see a 5-meter rise in ocean levels within the next decade if this ice sheet does in fact keep melting at the rate that it's going. How is Climate Central tracking that?
Yeah, well, we're very interested in that. Sea level rise is something that we do. We put a lot of work into trying to understand sea level rise in the United States and around the world. We're not directly involved with that research in Antarctica, but it's certainly troubling and something to keep an eye out for. One of the things I like to say is you never want to sit next to a glaciologist on an airplane because they will just bum you out because the changes that they're seeing are so extraordinary and so much faster than in many ways than the scientific literature is keeping up with. And so there's a lot of change going on around the world. The Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica is a big area of concern. The melting that we've had in Greenland year after year is another big point of concern. And it's not just sea level rise in Florida as well. You're also seeing changes in the circulation in the Atlantic due to melting in the Arctic. And that's having an effect on, the position of the Gulf Stream, on the strength and intensity of hurricanes and things like that.
Right. All troubling trends. And so what's your final thought then for our Florida listeners that are watching this with worry? People feel powerless to really do anything about it.
Yeah, well, I think there are a couple of things to think about. So one is that, you're not powerless, that we know what's coming, right? We can look at the projections and we can say that, Florida is going to, like most places, going to continue to get warmer, that your risks of some of these major events is going to increase. But the fact that we know that they're out there gives us some chance to prepare for them. So, thinking about how to design your cities, so that you can maybe help keep people cool, how to think about dealing with the more extreme rainfall that's likely to come, and obviously, thinking about how to deal with sea level rise along the coast. So, yeah, you can look at these, look in this news, and you can feel really hopeless, and I definitely have been there from time to time, but you can also look and you can say, we have a good sense for what's coming, and so that gives us some power over what we can do.
Thanks so much. He's Andrew Pershing, Director of Climate Science at our partner, Climate Central. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, the Jaguars played their final game of the season yesterday at home, beating the Colts. But it was something of a circus in more ways than one. In fact, people called it the Great Clown Out. What's that all about? Well, Josh Torres, our show director and sports analyst, is here now to explain. Josh, no clowning around. Okay, here, I've got to throw in some more puns about this.
It's okay, Melissa.
But,
yesterday we were officially in Clown Town.
That's right. Yesterday we became Clown Town because everyone decided to show up in clown costume, or a lot of fans did anyway. Why?
Well, this was mainly stemming from just their frustration with how the organization's being run, especially after the news that the team was planning on retaining general manager Trent Baalke, who, again, as I've said several times in the past week, he's just not respected in the league. And as a GM, you have to have that respect. And yesterday, the fans they decided we're going to do something about it. But under some magical grace of whatever deity is out there, the Jacksonville Jaguars came out in easily their best game of football, I would almost say, in the last 2 years. I mean, this was everybody in the press box just could not believe who this team was.
Do you think it's because they had the energy of the fans at their backs with all of this clown stuff? And
part of me thinks it was that, and then just them going, okay, guys, we can't lose a game where our fans are literally showing up dressed as clowns. We have to show out for this. It was just insane. And yeah, the Jags had a fantastic game. Trevor Lawrence looked amazing. The defense was incredible. And the one thing we have to remind people is the Colts, they're playing for a playoff spot. They needed to win that game to go to the playoffs. So this wasn't a game where,
it's do or die for them.
Yeah, they weren't sitting guys, resting them to get ready for the playoffs. All their star players were out there and playing, and the Jags absolutely stuffed them and just completely dismantled that team. And now the Colts are out of the playoffs. Granted, I will say they have not won in Jacksonville since 2014.
Oh, that's brutal.
So they just have a curse whenever they come down here to Jacksonville, Florida to play the Jags, and it continued yesterday.
Okay, so too bad for the Colts, but too bad for us too. So we limp to the end of this season. The team is already interviewing coaches for this open job. Who have they talked to? Who's on the short list?
So right now, the Jags have so far interviewed Jim Caldwell, Doug Peterson, both of them former head coaches who currently aren't coaching elsewhere. They also have interviewed Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. They've also interviewed current Tampa Bay offensive coordinator and former Jaguar Byron Leftwich, who I have said is one of the fan favorites to bring in. As to whether or not they will, that's kind of up in the air. I believe today they're going to interview former Texans head coach and current Alabama offensive coordinator, or at least sometime this week, because he probably is a little busy today, but we'll get to that a little later. For the head coaching job, he is definitely a person no one really wants, because he's not known as a player's coach. He's definitely seen as a guy who can butt heads with his player, which we already had that last year with Urban Meyer. So I really hope they don't bring that in, but it really is going to go down to who really wants this job, because unfortunately today is what we would refer to as Black Monday for the NFL. We've already had the Dolphins fire their head coach. The Bears have fired their head coach. Minnesota has fired their head coach. So the thing is, as more of these teams start making these moves, the Jacksonville job can become less and less nice looking. And
Yeah.
but from what I understand is this is going to be a very extensive search. The Jags aren't just going to go for the first person that they saw like they did last year in Urban Meyer. They're really going to do their homework, hopefully, and really look for that person, because the thing that they really need to look for is, one, who's going to be able to do something with Trevor, because Trevor's there. He's a lot more raw than I think a lot of people thought they were going to be in terms of his mechanics, but they need to see who's going to come in here and really develop this kid and make him into the star that he very much yesterday he looked like. He looked like an absolute star in the making if they can put the pieces around him. And then who's just going to bring that culture in, that winning culture. And it's really a term of, do you want to go for someone who has the experience of a head coach, or do you want to try something new and go for a rising young star, which a lot of teams have done?
Who do you like for this position?
The two I really do like are Byron Leftwich, obviously former quarterback, really helps out with that development of Trevor Lawrence. But I also really like Kellen Moore. He's been a rising star over the last few years. And actually, Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, who declined the chance to interview for this job during the season, actually coached Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore asked him to help him get ready for this interview, which kind of shows that he really maybe wants this job, or at least wants that chance. So I do actually like Kellen Moore, but I also do like Byron Leftwich, especially because of the fact that Bruce Arians, the current head coach of Tampa Bay, said he wouldn't go to Tampa if he couldn't bring Byron with him, which shows a lot that that head coach has a lot of trust in him and believes he is also a star coach in the future.
Star coach himself. Okay, so we're in the unenviable position of, once again, having the number 1 overall draft pick. What does the team need for the upcoming NFL draft?
Yes. Unfortunately, despite the fact that we won, Detroit also won yesterday against the Green Bay Packers. And because they had a tie earlier in the season, they do technically have a better record than the Jags. So the Jags do get that number 1 overall pick. Personally, if I was drafting, I would take Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon. Really great defensive lineman, pushes guys around. I really love his explosiveness off the line. The consensus is that it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson, the edge rusher out of Michigan. The only thing I just don't really like him is he really relies on speed to get through guys, and in the NFL that's really not going to work. So he's got some mechanics he's going to have to work on. But, I mean, overall in the draft, they just need so much. They really need a revamped offensive line. Last year's draft pick, Walker Little, when he was in, he looked fantastic. He really, really looked great, especially for a guy who hadn't played a competitive football game in over 2 years. And the few times that he did start this year on the line, he looked great and really helped out. And that's the thing, is they really need to find a good, solid offensive lineman who's going to be able to give Trevor Lawrence time to go through his progression to find the receivers, and then he needs a number 1 receiver. I like the quote that actually from Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. His number 1 receiver is actually one of his college roommates, Jamar Chase. And he made the joke of that we've seen the meme where he just kind of goes, screw it. Jamar's probably down there somewhere. And he said he has the confidence that if he throws a jump ball up to Jamar and another defender, Jamar Chase is going to be the one who comes down with it. And that's somebody that Trevor Lawrence needs. He needs that solid number 1 receiver that he knows even if he's in coverage, he's going to find a way to come down with the football.
Okay. So we also have a big football game tonight with Georgia. Let's talk about that.
Yes, and that's what I was referring to about current Alabama offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien. He is going against the Georgia Bulldogs tonight in the national championship game. Obviously, remember a few weeks back, Georgia and Alabama played each other for the SEC championship. Alabama absolutely dominated that game. So this is going to be very much a revenge game for Georgia to try and show them they've been the number 1 team all year, had looked fantastic, and got dismantled by Alabama. And so they're going to have to prove that this isn't just a fluke, that they really are the number 1 team in the country. I feel like it's going to be a great game, and I honestly can't really decide who, but I kind of see Georgia maybe being able to pull this one out, but I think it's going to be a very close game.
Now, Josh, we can celebrate the end of the Jaguars' dismal season, another losing season. But as you've been bringing up lately on the show, we do have one local team in the midst of a hot streak.
Yes, we do. The Jacksonville Icemen. This team is despite playing on high ice, they are red hot right now. They are, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, still standing at number 1 in the ECHL. The fact that we have a team here in Jacksonville that is currently not just at the top of their division, at the top of their league is fantastic to hear.
Mm-hmm.
If you can, I always highly recommend going to see their games because they're always a lot of fun. Plus, next week, they are going to be playing in the ECHL All-Star Game. A group of ECHL players from around the league are going to come here to Jacksonville to take on the Icemen. And honestly, with the way the Icemen have been playing, if I was one of those All-Stars, I might be a little scared to play because the Icemen have been fantastic right now. And there's going to be a lot of great things next week. If you do have a chance to go out to the All-Star Game, there's going to be a lot of stuff, including an appearance by what I consider to be one of the, if not the greatest trophy in sports. The Stanley Cup will be here in Jacksonville.
Oh, how fun is that?
At the ECHL All-Star Fan Fest. So if you can, go out, get a nice picture with the cup, and go out and cheer for the Icemen because they are absolutely killing it right now.
That's cool. Okay, last but not least, college basketball is going strong. Some exciting matchups over the weekend, including an overtime game. How are local teams doing?
Right now, one side's doing really great. One side's got some work to do. We'll start with JU. Had some great games. They actually played Florida Gulf Coast. The men's team had a buzzer-beating three-pointer from their logo. That was insane to see. Unfortunately, their women's team lost to FGCU. We go over to UNF. Two exciting matchups. Unfortunately, the women, they did lose to Stetson on Saturday. And the men, great game back and forth. Unfortunately, they also lost on a buzzer beater to Stetson. So the UNF men's and women's team definitely have a lot of work to do to really get their season going.
All right, Josh Torres. Follow him on Twitter at Josh is a Polar Bear. I don't know what you're going to do with yourself now that football season's over, my friend.
I get college basketball. It's okay.
Okay. And in a moment, how you can celebrate the Chinese New Year with new plant-based eatery Hakka Kitchen. We'll speak with their genius chef, Wen Rady, part of our dining series here on the show. That's next.
VyStar has proudly served military and civil service personnel and their families since 1952. If you live or work in a county they serve in Northeast and Central Florida, you can join. Learn more about all that VyStar has to offer at vystarcu.org. Sporer Dodd, a Florida-based law firm with a reputation for skilled, aggressive advocacy against corporations, individuals, and government agencies. Sporer Dodd has recovered over $1 billion on behalf of clients. Learn more today at sdlitigation.com. WJCT Public Media and the Florida Theater present Jim Brickman live at the WJCT Soundstage on Friday, February 4th, 2022 at 8 p.m. Best known for his star-studded vocal collaborations that have crossed genres to feature artists like Martina McBride, Carly Simon, Lady Antebellum, and Michael Bolton. Visit jacksmusic.org/events for tickets.
I'm Scott Tong. COVID vaccines are widely available in much of the developed world, but getting shots to lower-income countries has proved challenging. But now a new vaccine, Corbavax, may be a way to provide protection to more people and stem the global pandemic. We'll talk to Dr. Peter Hotez. He helped develop Corbavax. Next time on Here and Now.
Today at 2 on WJCT News 89.9.
Cynthia is a registered nurse in Indianapolis. She's one of many still toiling away on the front lines in the battle against COVID. She says they expect better guidance from the CDC.
Extend the quarantine, but drop the requirement for a negative test.
Are we treating America's essential workers fairly? Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, here's something fun. You can celebrate the upcoming Chinese New Year with Hakka Kitchen. Hakka Kitchen is a new restaurant serving plant-based Chinese countryside cuisine under the former House of Leaf and Bean brand. Now, they're hosting a Chinese New Year culinary event coming up January 29th at 7 p.m. with a delicious 5-course meal. You can learn more about the Chinese New Year. 2022 is the year of the tiger in the Chinese calendar. And this is a new option for plant-based eating in the city, which I highly recommend. So we're continuing our occasional series on dining all around town here on the show as I speak with Wen Rady, owner of the new Hakka Kitchen. Take a listen. Hi, Wen. It's so good to talk to you. So tell us all about the new Hakka Kitchen.
Yes. How many minutes are you going to give it to me?
10 minutes.
So, as you know, House Leaf and Bean was a lot more like a cafe style, fast casual dining concept. And we also have the menu items based on the Hakka tradition. And then there are also very popular menu items. So when we have a new chef coming on board as executive chef, Marshall Zinn, he suggested that we should broaden our audience so that our food can reach more people. We started discuss this kind of concept for since July, and we just keep exploring different dining concepts and different type of dishes. So after a few months, we said, well, our most popular dishes is Hakka dishes. Why can't we just make it all Hakka dishes? So Hakka is part of my heritage. It's one ethnicity in China, originally from northwest China. It's one type of Han Chinese early tribe. They migrated to different part of China and then the rest of the world through 1,500 years migration. So during all this migration, they maintain their culture, maintain their language. So nowadays, Hakka people speak very different type of language. Their cuisine also changed throughout the migration, adapting to the local and then the environment. So that's why our dishes sound like, looks like international, but actually it's a very unique Hakka people's dishes.
So when we come to eat at Hakka Kitchen, tell us about some of the delicious entrees we'll be enjoying.
All right. Entree or two things in my mind right away. I would say dumplings and baozi is a steamed bun. That has been very popular since we opened 2 days. Everybody wanted to try. The entree, I would always recommend the curry tofu and eggplant steak.
I can't wait to try the new menu because I eat mostly vegan these days. So I'm always
so
looking
happy.
for restaurants where I can eat the way I want to eat, and you are so high on the list. You came to this for health reasons yourself, didn't you?
Correct. Yes, indeed. Actually, both myself, and Chef Marshall came to this lifestyle because of health. And if you get the chance in the future, you can talk to Chef Marshall about his transformation in diet as executive chef for many years, cooking meat all his life. But now he's totally in as a plant-based diet.
Yeah, plant-based.
And he's really excited to making all delicious plant-based meals.
That's the
Not
thing.
only
Like you can
Uh-huh.
have the most delicious foods eating plant-based, which you prove every day, Wen.
Correct. Exactly. That's what we are trying to do. Trying to change minds. That all those people out there think that plant-based meals are boring, not tasting. We're going to change their minds and tell them that it's not true. You can eat very delicious, very satisfying plant-based meals in Hakka Kitchen.
Well, I can't wait to visit. Of course, I visited when it was House of Leaf and Bean. Now it is reborn as Hakka Kitchen. Find this amazing place at the corner of Beach and San Pablo. Plant-based Chinese countryside cuisine inspired by the Hakka people. Chef and owner Wen Rady. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you.
And get those tickets fast for their Chinese New Year celebration, folks. Go to lovehakkakitchen.com for that. Happy dining. And that's our show. Thanks for listening. Thanks also to senior producer Heather Schatz, director Josh Torres, associate producer Catherine Hobbs, editorial director Jessica Palumbo, and news editor Randy Roguski. And you, the listeners, keep your feedback coming. Drop us a line at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We always appreciate hearing from you. I'm Melissa Ross, and we'll be right back here again at 9 a.m. tomorrow. In the meantime, make it a great Monday, everybody.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.